At my brother's engagement dinner, his fiancée smirked and said, "We're keeping the guest list small, you're not invited." So, this happened last weekend, and I still don't know if I'm proud or just devastated. My younger brother, Cameron, recently got engaged to his longtime girlfriend, Brittany. She's the type of woman who grew up believing she was God's gift to humanity. And somehow, my entire family just enabled it. She's gorgeous, sure, in that perfectly curated Instagram influencer way. But more importantly, she's loaded. Or rather, her parents are. They own half the commercial real estate in downtown Phoenix. And since Cameron started dating her 3 years ago, he's transformed completely. Not subtle changes, I'm talking full personality transplant. Cameron used to be this laid-back guy who'd help me move apartments or catch a Diamondbacks game on a random Tuesday. But ever since Brittany entered the picture, it's like he's been auditioning for a completely different life. A richer one. One that apparently has no room for his older sister. I'm 31, work in non-profit management for Children's Literacy Foundation, and while I do fine financially, I'm not flashy. I don't carry designer purses or drive luxury cars. My trusty Honda Civic has served me well for 8 years. I've always been the practical one in our family, but I thought I was at least respected for it. Boy, was I wrong. The invitation to Cameron and Brittany's engagement dinner came via text from Mom. "Brittany's doing a small family dinner Saturday. You should come. Don't bring anyone." That was it. No actual invitation, no RSVP request, no address until 2 days beforehand. Real classy. When I showed up at Brittany's parents' Scottsdale mansion, dressed nicely, I might add, the atmosphere was arctic from the moment I walked through their marble-floored foyer. I'd brought a thoughtful gift, a handwritten card congratulating them, plus a bottle of Cameron's favorite bourbon that I'd been saving. Brittany examined my offerings like I'd handed her a bag of trash. "Oh," she said, not even attempting politeness. "Thanks. We're not really doing gifts tonight, but, whatever." The dinner itself was a parade of passive-aggressive comments and backhanded compliments. Brittany's mother, Patricia, kept mentioning how quaint my non-profit work must be. Her father, Richard, made several jokes about government workers and their limited perspectives. Meanwhile, my own parents just smiled and nodded along like bobbleheads. But the real knife came during the toasts. Cameron stood up, champagne flute in hand, thanking everyone for celebrating with them. Then Brittany rose gracefully, that pageant smile plastered across her face. "We're so excited to share this journey with the people who truly matter to us," she began sweetly. "Which is why we're keeping our wedding guest list very intimate. Very selective." Her eyes found mine across the table. No plus ones, especially for certain people. The table erupted in knowing chuckles. Even my Uncle Frank, usually the family peacemaker, grinned and added, "Hey Haley, maybe you can work coat check at the reception." More laughter rippled around the table. I looked desperately at Mom, hoping she'd defend me. Instead, she raised her wine glass higher and chimed in, "Well, let's just be grateful Cameron's even including family at all. Some brides are much more exclusive." That's when something inside me snapped. But I kept my expression neutral, smiled politely, and began reaching into my purse. What nobody at that gleaming dinner table knew, what I hadn't told a single soul, was that I had been quietly bankrolling significant portions of their dream wedding. 6 months earlier, when Cameron and Brittany first got engaged, they toured Whisper Creek Ranch, this stunning estate venue in Cave Creek. It's where all the Phoenix elite hold their celebrations, sprawling desert views, restored adobe buildings, the works. Cameron called me that night, deflated. "Haley, it's perfect, but we can't swing it. Even with Brittany's parents contributing, we're short about 15 grand just for the venue." Here's the thing about working in non-profit management, you network with people who own beautiful properties and want tax write-offs. The ranch owner, Maria Gonzalez, had been one of our foundation's major donors for years. One phone call from me, and suddenly Cameron had his dream venue at a fraction of the cost, with me quietly covering the difference. But that wasn't all. When Brittany wanted celebrity chef Antonio Ruiz to cater, the same guy who'd cooked for 3 different governors, my parents begged me to help with a deposit. It would mean so much to Cameron, Dad had pleaded. And you know Brittany's family is being weird about splitting costs. Like an idiot, I said yes. I always said yes to Cameron. So I'd written a check for $8,000, 40% of Antonio's fee, just to secure his services. The contract was in my name since I was handling the payment. Sitting at that dinner table, listening to them mock me while literally eating food paid for with money I'd helped provide, something crystallized. I pulled out the manila folder I'd brought in my purse, originally planning to give Cameron copies of all the wedding contracts as a surprise. Instead, I stood up slowly, every eye at the table focusing on me. "You know what, Brittany?" I said, loud enough for the entire table to hear. "You're absolutely right about keeping things intimate. So I'll help you out." I opened the folder with theatrical flair. "I'll contact Whisper Creek Ranch tomorrow morning and let Maria know you won't be needing my sponsorship anymore. I'm sure you can handle the full price. It's only $28,000 for the venue alone." The silence was deafening. Even the soft jazz music playing from their sound system seemed to pause. "And Antonio's catering company will need their deposit back by Friday, or they'll have to release your date. That's $8,000, by the way. Hope that's not a problem." Brittany's face had gone sheet white. Cameron's mouth was literally hanging open. My parents looked like they'd been slapped. I closed the folder, tucked it back in my purse, and picked up my wine glass. "Thanks for such a memorable evening. Really showed me where I stand." Then I walked out, head high, leaving behind 20 years of family toxicity and finally feeling like I could breathe again. My phone started buzzing before I'd even reached my car. The digital assault began immediately. First, a text from Mom while I was still sitting in my car in their circular driveway. "What the hell was that? You embarrassed the entire family." Then Cameron, "Of course, are you seriously going to destroy my wedding over a stupid joke? This is insane, Haley." But my personal favorite came from Brittany herself. "This is exactly why we didn't want you involved. You're pathetic and jealous. Grow up." I turned off my phone, drove home to my cozy temp apartment, poured myself a generous glass of Pinot Grigio, and for the first time in years, felt like I'd reclaimed my self-respect. The real chaos started Monday morning. I woke up to someone pounding on my door like the building was on fire. Through the peephole, I saw Cameron's puffy, red-rimmed eyes. No call, no warning, just full desperation mode. "You're being completely irrational," he said the instant I opened the door. No greeting, no apology. "Look, I get that your feelings were hurt, but this is Brittany's dream wedding. You can't just sabotage everything because you can't take a joke." I leaned against my doorframe, arms crossed. "A joke? Cameron, they humiliated me in front of our entire family, and you sat there laughing along." He ran his hands through his hair frantically. "It wasn't that bad. You're being way too sensitive. This is just how Brittany's family talks. They're sarcastic. You need to toughen up. Or," I said calmly, "you need to grow a spine and defend the people who actually love you." That's when he really lost it. "You're just jealous," he shouted. "Jealous that I'm getting married and you're still, whatever this is." He gestured at me dismissively. "You've always resented that I found someone better than the losers you date." The cruelty in his voice hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't anger talking, this was what he really thought of me. "No, Cameron," I said quietly. "I'm not punishing you because I'm jealous. I'm punishing you because I finally realized I don't owe you anything. Not my money, not my time, and definitely not my silence while you let people treat me like garbage." He stormed off, and I thought that might be the end of it. I was wrong. 3 days later, Maria from Whisper Creek Ranch called me. She sounded irritated. "Haley, your brother's fiancée contacted my events coordinator and tried to bully her into honoring their original rate. She claimed you had no authority to cancel their sponsorship and that we were legally obligated to honor our agreement." I apologized profusely, but Maria just laughed. "Don't worry about it. I already told them they could take their entitled attitude somewhere else. I don't work with brides who disrespect my donors. Word of advice? This kind of behavior spreads fast in our industry." She was right. Phoenix's wedding industry is surprisingly small, and vendor networks talk. Within a week, Cameron and Brittany were discovering that Brittany's reputation for being difficult had preceded her to every major venue in the valley. The wedding industry blacklisting was just the beginning. Maria's warning about word spreading proved prophetic. Within days, Cameron and Brittany were persona non grata at every decent venue in Phoenix. But the real explosion came when Brittany's parents discovered exactly how much of their daughter's perfect wedding had been funded by the family member she'd publicly humiliated. I wasn't there for the confrontation, but my cousin Rachel filled me in over coffee at our usual spot in Old Town Scottsdale. Rachel had stayed neutral through all the family drama, until Brittany made the mistake of calling her a charity case enabler at Sunday brunch for defending me. Patricia went absolutely nuclear, Rachel told me, stirring her latte with obvious satisfaction. When she found out you'd been covering major wedding expenses while they let their daughter mock you publicly, she called it tacky beyond belief. She told your mom, if you can't control the dysfunction in your own family, you have no business hosting a wedding in mine. According to Rachel, Brittany's mother laid down the law immediately. They weren't bailing anyone out financially, and if Cameron's family wanted to continue this circus, they could fund it themselves. The engagement party, scheduled for the following Saturday at some trendy rooftop bar downtown, became the first casualty. Mom had finally agreed to cover the venue cost, probably trying to salvage some dignity, but with the main wedding falling apart, Brittany decided to move the party to her friend Chloe's backyard for a more intimate, rustic vibe. Which would have been fine, except Chloe backed out the night before. Apparently, word about the family drama had reached even Brittany's social circle, and nobody wanted to host the mess. I didn't hear about the cancellation from my family. I found out through Instagram, when someone tagged Brittany in a story with the caption, "When the bride has to cancel 2 events in 1 week because she played herself nail polish #karma." By Monday, my inbox was flooded with messages from extended family members, family friends, even Cameron's co-workers who'd witnessed the dinner fiasco. Apparently, the story of my dramatic exit had spread far beyond our immediate circle. Cameron's boss, David, sent me a particularly touching email. If I had known you were Cameron's sister during that dinner, I would have said something. That kind of disrespect was appalling. You handled it with more grace than most people would have managed. Even distant relatives I barely spoke to were reaching out with support. My great-aunt Susan from Tucson wrote, "Honey, I've been watching that girl treat you poorly at family gatherings for 3 years. About time someone stood up to her." But the real cherry on top came from Maria at Whisper Creek Ranch. She posted a video tour of the venue on her business Instagram with the caption, "Reminder to future brides, make sure your funding is secure before disrespecting your sponsors. We do our research left-pointing magnifying glass #professional courtesy #know your donors." Petty? Maybe. But I didn't need to comment or share it. The wedding industry's Whisper network had already done the work for me. Then came the call I never expected. Cameron showed up at my apartment again, but this time there was no anger, no righteous indignation. He looked like he'd aged 5 years in 5 days, hollow-eyed, unshaven, holding a Starbucks cup like it was the only thing keeping him upright. I didn't say anything, just stepped aside and let him in. He stood in my living room, staring at my bookshelf like it held answers to life's biggest questions. Finally, he turned to me with a voice barely above a whisper, "I think I screwed up everything." I raised an eyebrow but didn't respond. After years of cleaning up his messes, I wasn't about to hand him easy absolution. "She's not who I thought she was," he continued, sinking onto my couch. "Or maybe she is, and I just didn't want to see it because I was so desperate to belong in her world." He took a shaky sip of coffee. "She told me this would all blow over. That you were being typically dramatic and would come crawling back once we got married because family always does. But nobody's coming back, Haley. Everyone's pulling away." I settled into my armchair across from him, waiting. Her parents think I'm a pathetic loser who can't provide for their daughter. My co-workers keep making jokes about family funding and backyard weddings. The venue situation made us look desperate and shady. He paused, his voice cracking slightly. "And Brittany. God, Brittany just keeps getting worse." "What about Brittany?" I asked quietly. She laughed when I told her how upset everyone was. Said, "At least now we know who our real supporters are." Then she started talking about replacing you as my best man with her brother Austin. That hit me harder than expected. I was going to be your best man. Cameron looked at me like I'd just asked if the sky was blue. "Of course you were. You're my sister. You've always had my back, even when I didn't deserve it. Then why did you let them humiliate me?" He dropped his face into his hands. "Because I thought keeping her happy was more important than standing up for you. Because I didn't want to make waves. Because I've always been the screw in our family, and for once, I had something that made me look successful. A beautiful fiancé with money, a fancy venue, the whole fairy tale. And I was terrified of losing it." The silence stretched between us. "I'm sorry," he added, and for the first time in months, I believed him. But I also knew sorry wasn't enough. Cameron, I said carefully, you didn't just hurt me at that dinner. You've been hurting me for months. Every time you chose Brittany's approval over basic decency. Every time you let her make snide comments about my life. Every time you took my help and then made me feel like an inconvenience. That doesn't disappear because you finally realized she's not worth it. He nodded, tears starting to fall. I know I've been a terrible brother. So what happens now? Cameron looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. I ended it. I nearly choked on my water. You ended the engagement. This morning. She said I wasn't ambitious enough to be in her circle. That she needed a partner who would fight for their place in society, not someone who coasts on pity and family handouts. I guess when the money dried up, so did her affection. The raw pain in his voice was hard to hear, even after everything. So what do you want from me now? I asked. I don't know, he admitted. I want my sister back. I wish I could say we hugged and everything magically healed, but real life isn't a Hallmark movie. I told Cameron I needed time, that forgiveness is earned through consistent action, not just apologized for when everything falls apart. He said he understood, and maybe he actually did. 2 days later, I found a handwritten letter slipped under my apartment door. Cameron's messy scrawl covered 3 pages, and as I read it, I felt something shift in my chest. Hayley, I've been trying to figure out how to say this, so I'm just going to write down every single time I remember failing you. When Brittany called your apartment cute in that condescending way, and I didn't say anything. When she joked about your Honda being a starter car at 31, and I laughed along. When you helped me through my unemployment last year, and I never properly thanked you because I was embarrassed. When you paid for Mom's birthday dinner and I let everyone assume it was my treat. When Brittany said your non-profit job was noble but not practical, and I nodded like an idiot. When you drove me to the ER during my anxiety attack and stayed all night, then I barely mentioned it to Brittany because I thought it made me look weak. Every single time I took and never gave back. Every single time I made you feel small so I could feel bigger. You were the only person who ever showed up for me without asking for anything in return. You deserved so much better than what I gave you. I hope someday I can be the kind of brother you were to me. Love, Cameron. P.S. I know this doesn't fix anything. But I wanted you to know that I see it now. All of it. The letter sat on my kitchen counter for a week while I processed everything. Cameron didn't call or text, didn't push for a response. He just waited. Meanwhile, the aftermath of the broken engagement continued playing out like a soap opera. Brittany tried damage control on social media, posting cryptic quotes about toxic family dynamics and knowing your worth. But the comments weren't kind. Apparently, enough people had heard about the dinner disaster that public opinion wasn't on her side. The venue returned Cameron's date to their calendar. Maria even called to tell me they'd already rebooked it for a much nicer couple. Her words, not mine. Antonio's catering company sent Cameron a professional but firm letter requiring payment for the cancelled deposit within 30 days. Without my contribution, he was on the hook for the full amount. But the most satisfying development came from an unexpected source, Brittany's own social circle. Rachel texted me a screenshot from a private Instagram story. Someone had recorded Brittany at a Scottsdale bar, completely drunk, ranting about how ungrateful my family was and how we'd sabotaged her happiness out of jealousy. The video had apparently circulated through her friend group, and the response was not sympathetic. One comment that particularly stood out, "Girl, maybe if you hadn't treated his sister like trash while she was literally paying for your wedding." Even her own friends were starting to see through the victim narrative. 3 weeks after the dinner that changed everything, I finally called Cameron back. "I read your letter," I said when he answered on the first ring. And it's a start. But Cameron, if we're going to rebuild this relationship, things have to be different. Really different. I know. Tell me what you need. We met at our old spot, a tiny Mexican restaurant in Tempe where we used to go as kids when Mom was too tired to cook. Sitting across from each other in that familiar red booth, I laid out my terms. First, no more money. I'm not your personal bank anymore. If you need financial help, ask like an adult and accept no as an answer. He nodded. Second, respect. I don't care who you're dating or what their family thinks of me. You defend me, or you lose me. It's that simple. Absolutely. Third, reciprocity. This can't be a one-way relationship anymore. I need to know you're invested in my life too, not just when you need something. I want that, he said quietly. I miss actually knowing what's going on with you. We talked for 2 hours. Really talked, about his relationship patterns, about my tendency to enable them, about how we'd both contributed to the dysfunction. It wasn't comfortable, but it was honest. Cameron admitted he'd been in therapy since the breakup. I kept wondering why I kept choosing people who made me feel small, he said. Turns out I thought I deserved it. I shared my own realization, that I'd been so afraid of losing people that I'd accept any treatment, no matter how poor. But losing you anyway made me realize that some relationships aren't worth saving at any cost. By the end of our conversation, we weren't magically fixed, but we had a foundation to build on. 6 months later, Cameron is dating someone new, a teacher named Amy who laughs at his terrible jokes and actually asks me about my work when we have family dinners. He's also started contributing to Mom's birthday celebrations and remembering to ask about my life before launching into his own updates. As for Brittany, last I heard, she'd moved to Los Angeles to pursue opportunities in lifestyle consulting, which, according to Rachel's sources, means she's unsuccessfully trying to become an influencer while living with 3 roommates in Marina del Rey. But here's what I learned from all of this. Sometimes the best revenge isn't a dramatic scene or public humiliation. Sometimes it's simply refusing to accept treatment that doesn't match your value. I didn't just walk away from that dinner table. I walked away from 28 years of being the reliable backup plan, the family member who would always swallow her hurt to keep the peace. No more. These days, when my phone rings and someone needs a favor, I pause before answering. I ask myself, is this reciprocal? Is this respectful? Is this someone who shows up for me too? Sometimes the answer is yes, and I'm happy to help. Sometimes it's no, and I'm happy to politely decline. Either way, I'm happy. And that's something I hadn't been able to say in a very long time. The best part? Cameron called me last week just to tell me about a funny thing that happened at work. No crisis, no favor needed, he just wanted to share a moment with his sister. That's when I knew we were going to be okay. Sometimes the best revenge is healing. Sometimes it's boundaries. And sometimes, if you're really lucky, it's getting your brother back, but this time, as equals.